What I'm doing here today is I'll have a talk, and that is mostly centered about metrics, right? And that was why I was a little bit scared that this may be probably a little bit too boring in the end, right? Because we're talking about numbers. And the whole presentation doesn't have any screenshots. There's no videos, no music playing, nothing. So probably I'm the only one who comes up with a topic that, that boring and that early in the morning. I hope that you still can listen to that a little bit. And the question is, why the heck would we care? Why would we look at metrics? Why would all these things be important to us? And at Aeria, we think that metrics actually can explain not only how your game works, you can also sometimes understand a little bit more about how the outside world works. And that's where things get really interesting and where it gets a little bit entertaining. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, what we see when metrics in our games actually deliver us some extra insight about the world outside. So as Andre said before, Aeria Games is a company that probably not everybody knows here, although we've now, and that's something that even Andre didn't know, we're now as big in Europe as we are in the US. We have a huge portfolio, 20 download MMOs, which is important for the metrics. I'll come to that a little bit later. We have 45, or I think now approaching 50 million registered users, 9 languages, 20 countries, and all of this good stuff. We have 320 employees in 3 offices in Santa Clara, in the Silicon Valley, in Berlin, which is the office that I'm leading, which is running all the European operations, and in Sao Paulo in Brazil. So this is our offices. And if you look at our community, you see that the community has grown to be really European. Most of it, if you look at this here, is like our European community. So it's grown into a sizable, nice set of people that we can run actual experiments on, that we can use to generate and to understand more about our games. So how metrics shape decisions. This is what we're going to do. I'll have a talk that consists of a couple of slides where I show graphs, like numbers and lines, And if for some reason you think that you don't understand something, just raise your hand. The group is small enough, and we can just go into these details. So I'll just have some of these, and I'll go into some of the metrics that we're using to understand our players and our games a little bit better. Does that make sense? It's always cool if you're here in front and you see people nodding their heads. It's like, okay, yeah, cool. So people are kind of participating, or at least they try to follow. Good. So this is the Aeria Games sales data mart, and I just have that here. This is like the most technical that I can get about it, right? We have a lot of games, and the problem is that we have them all coming from different license sources. So we're licensing these games, and some come from Taiwan, some come from Korea, some come from China, some come from the US, or from Turkey, or from wherever, and they are all built on very different technology. And what we do, what our sales data mart does, it takes it all together and brings this pieces of data onto one level where we can start comparing it. So we have to define units of action and events where we say, okay, this is comparable to that game, and when somebody, completes a quest in this game, this is actually comparable to this event in another game, right? So this is what we do, and this layer, the sales data mart, helps us to generate this data that makes it possible for us to benchmark and compare between games. We look at metrics in 3 different buckets. One is acquisition, user acquisition. One is retention, how to keep the people playing your game. And probably the one that is the most important in the end, is monetization. But all of them are going to be topics of this talk today, and we'll start with acquisition. Acquisition, what does that mean? New players coming in. And here, there are some things that you should take care of. When you're building a game, when you're publishing a game, when you're just looking at the game and their metrics, always make sure to differentiate between organic and paid traffic. Because these different traffic sources, and this is a motive that will come back throughout this talk, organic traffic, so that means people who are just coming to your game because they found it somewhere, without you having to push them through a banner or through any ad. When they come to your game, they found you from their free will, and so they're much more likely to behave like a good gamer. So they'll stay, they'll pay money, They'll stay for a long time. So you always have to look at these different traffic sources. And it gives you a good indication on attractiveness and your marketing skill. Because if you have a game that is really highly attractive, for example, like Heiko mentioned, a Game of Thrones, you would suddenly bring in a lot of organic players, people that are genuinely interested in the brand, in the game, and they want to try it out. And I'm sure that these guys are going to have a good monetization, they'll retain well, because they're coming with an intrinsic interest to your game. And the number of paid players, that will actually give you a good indication whether your game is actually doing well or whether your team is doing well on the marketing side. And it also shows you, definitely when you see a drop in new players, that there may be something wrong, people cannot play, the game may be down or so. So these things come to that as well. So look at this. This is really interesting. So you have here three curves, and those are actually three different countries. That's why I say, you know, sometimes we can see that countries are really different, because this line here does not behave like the other lines. It has like two very distinct peaks here. The numbers, by the way, that this shows is new players per month. So this game would have like probably 11,000 new players in the month of March, right? This game has more like 18,000 players in the month of September. So we were asking ourselves, well, you know, what is this? And this is Germany. This is France. Any guess what the above could be? Right? Because, and I know you guys from Peak Games, you could probably know what this is. This is Ramadan. Right? And in Ramadan, it's actually, you know, and Ramadan at the moment is in summertime. This moves through the year. So summertime in Turkey, it's freaking hot, right? So people don't go outside. Like in Germany, they say, hey, it's good weather, I go outside. In Turkey, they say, yeah, it's good weather, I stay inside. Because there's air conditioning, I'm there playing with my computer. And then Ramadan is also a time where people actually, you know, they cannot do so much. They're not working. All the country is not working, for example, so they have a lot of time to play. And that's why you have a solid attractiveness for your game. And I can tell you, there is no influence on new players in the whole world that we cover, actually, as strong as Ramadan, because this is a pretty long holiday. It takes for a couple of days. All the country is off, and if it's also in summer, this drives people to play computer games, which is really nice. Next time you're launching a game in Turkey, consider Ramadan. So this is one of the things where I think, hey, isn't that awesome, right? We're looking at the game, and suddenly we see that a country behaves completely different than the other countries would be. You could also look at new players and find out gameplay issues. So this is, for example, a graph. Do all of you guys understand what I'm talking about, by the way? If you have questions, just come up and ask, right? So this is our paid traffic, the blue line, right? This is people that we're bringing in through banner advertisements. And this is our organic traffic. So people that are just coming into us for no reason. So we were looking at this and we were like, man, suddenly this game became awesome, right? Before that it was like, no. And here, suddenly it became cool. What is that? Now you could say, hey, probably it's like a viral effect and people start talking about it and they go up. I don't really believe much in viral effects, so in this case, it's actually not. And we were digging deeper and we were trying to find out, why did that happen? It was too good to be true, right? It would be cool from one day to the other. You get more players in there, you have to spend less on marketing, the game will grow, it will all be good. And we looked at this. We saw that our buyer conversion, you know, so people that after 3 days have actually turned into a buyer, people who 3 days after registration put down their credit cards, this went up quickly at the same time. So we're like, hey, it's even better, right? You get more people and they pay more, awesome. Unfortunately, that's not the case. What we found out was that the producer on that game, he had a new first-time buyer package. So in this first-time buyer package was really valuable because you want to make people spend money on your game, right? So you give them something that is really cool, and they say, wow, all this only for $1 or for $2, so I'll do it. And they went in there and they got, I think it was a cool mount. Unfortunately, this was a tradable mount. So the guys went in there, made up a new account, put down their credit card, bought that mount, went away somewhere else on like Chinese channels and started selling their mounts. Okay? So this is exactly what happened here. And so we thought, oh man, sad but true, the game isn't as cool. It's not that people are talking about it. There are just some people who are actually frauding us, right? And this is what we see by data, and that's, then it becomes really interesting. Then you go back and you research all these other channels where people would actually be able to sell their items outside of the game. That will be here. So there's another thing that wait a second. Yeah. Another thing that we're measuring, this was about the acquisition side. This is now about the retention rate, right? Retention rate means it's like a survivor rate, right? If you have like 1,000 people coming in on April 1st, how many of them will still be in there after 3 days, after 7 days, after 30 days? And probably after 30 days, it's only 200 left, or 250 left of the 1,000 that you brought in there. So this would be a 25% retention rate after 30 days. This is how we look at it, right? And this has a massive influence on all your game metrics, because your players are multipliers, right? So in the moment that they stay with your game and that they like your game and that you can improve this metric only by a little bit, you're also winning somebody over who probably promotes it to his friends. So retention rate, a difference, just like in a couple of percentage points, makes a huge, huge, huge difference on our company's P&L in the end. And actually, calendar days, we found out, are heavily influencing our retention rates. So if you look at these curves here now again, you see this retention rate, right? You say after 5 days, there's like 50% still here. After 30 days, there's still 30% in there. And this goes down, right, over time. That's the normal way how such a survivor curve would look like. But then you see that between here and here, there's actually like a pretty massive difference, right? February and January, they're very close. But then there's this one thing, this orange line here, where we actually don't know what it is. And when we found out, I was actually shocked, because it was a 30% difference in retention rate, right? And that was Valentine's Day. What does that mean? That means that those people that actually register for our game on Valentine's Day are much more likely to stay in the game. They're much better gamers. And I think that this was always the stereotype that we were all fighting against. The guys that don't get a date, they're the good gamers. My goodness. And we have proof for that. And it's like a 30% difference. So this was really strong, and we were looking at it. Hey, so wow, this is really bad. So if you look at the retention rates between different cohorts, you see that, for example, a weekday, like a Thursday, is definitely a better day than a Monday. That makes sense, right? Because there's the weekend in between. But out of all the days in the year, all of the days in the year 2011, the day with the strongest retention rate was Valentine's Day. So, and that sheds a bad light up on us gamers. But anyway, I mean, this is how data is. We cannot really argue with it. This is just what we have watched, what we've seen. This is another thing. So we're looking at retention rates, and we see how these retention rates trend over time, because this is important for us, right? In the moment that we're releasing new content, we want to know if this content lets the people play for a longer time, or if at some point they would probably say, this content is not good and it lets me drop off earlier. So there are natural changes in there, that could be driven by seasonality, or, so it's hot outside, so people don't retain as well, and, in the summertime, typically trends up. But we had something here where we thought, okay, this is weird, right? And in the UK, actually, it wasn't that affected. And that's a nice thing that we have by having so many different games that we can look at. We can always benchmark, and we can compare, and we can see, hey, why are all our games, in Germany dropping so much, while in another territory it seems completely unaffected? And we were actually working hard, and we were trying to figure out what it is, and we thought it's probably an issue with an internet service provider or so. We had like all these technical explanations, and because we were working so hard to try to find out what it is, we forgot that there was the Euro Cup, right? And in the Euro Cup, we saw that it seems that all of our German people's time budget was so restrained, because we really loved our team, right? There was a lot of empathy with our team. We thought they would really make it this time, right? That new team, passionate, and we were all looking at it. And so we watched it, especially in the beginning when we said, wow, these first games, they were really awesome. For the UK, it was different. They hated their team. From the beginning on, they thought these guys suck, and they were actually, they were actually surprised that they did get that far, right? Because they got out of the tournament only at that point more or less like 2 or 3 days difference to the German team, but they didn't like him, and we believe that this is the reason. Isn't that interesting? That you see these things, and if you're looking at other territories, you see something in between. So the UK and Germany, they have the strongest difference in here. We were definitely the ones that were the most passionate about the Euro Cup in this year. Here's something else. So if you want to look at retention rates to detect technical problems, this is a very interesting example that kept us busy for hours and hours and hours, and we didn't understand what was happening here. And by the way, this is one that is not very funny in the end. So this is not one like the Ramadan example. So this is only, you see, things are trending for organic and for paid the same way. Interestingly, we see, let's just look at the paid retention rate. So people that come in through a banner, and here it drops. We found out later that there was a problem that affected only like 15 or 20% of all players. It was a trouble with the hardware specification. So if you had like a version of Windows 7, it wouldn't play. So it would affect only a subset of the players. So not everybody could not play anymore, but just a subset. And we fixed the issue here, and it went up back to normal. So we saw, wow, that's cool. And the interesting thing is what happened is that the organic retention rate went up much bigger, much further. And we were like, why is that now? Why are now coming people in? And we were like, wow, probably we've even fixed more. Probably we had an issue already here, so that this is the new level, but then it dropped back. What we found out was that a lot of people, actually, when the problem got cleared and got solved, they still came in and registered again, and they just didn't click on a banner, but they just registered through the organic way. But they were actually, these people that registered here, they were actually the same people as these. So they have a much higher likelihood to just stay in the game because they've played it before. They just created a new account. That's what caused the spike in our organic retention rate here. This is how we read these things, right? And this is how we use it to manage our games. And now, just let's, I'm pretty quick today, so I hope that, you let me know if we have some metrics and how these metrics construct revenue. There are like 2 different ways how we look at it. And I just wanted to do this exercise once without probably telling too many new things here. Because I feel that sometimes we're not talking about the same things when we're discussing games, when we're discussing about metrics. We don't have like one standard for it. And I want this, and I think this could be a good standard of looking at. So there are 2 different ways of looking at how a game actually generates revenue. One is you have a cohort size. You have 1,000 people coming in on April 1st, and you have an average revenue per user. And you say in the first 30 days, they're actually making €2, right? So after 30 days, they've actually made €2,000 for us as a whole. Makes sense? Okay? That's one way how we can look at it. It just has like this very general number, an average revenue per user that we tie to everybody that's coming into the game, regardless whether he spends or not, right? 1,000 people come in, I make $2,000 with these guys, so everybody somehow contributed $2 in the meantime. Most likely, it's only a certain percentage that's spending, but they're spending more than $20. So in the end, you construct the $2,000. This is one way how you can look at it. And the other one is a little bit more detailed. You look at these 1,000 people again, and you say, you have the cohort size of 1,000 people, and then you say, but out of these 1,000 people, probably only 10% pay. So there's 100 people, right? And these people, they have an average revenue per paying user. And this average revenue per paying user is actually $20. So you have 100 people that's spending $20. So overall, it's $2,000 that they're spending here. This gives you a little bit more detail about your community because it splits it up and says how many people have actually spent money and how much have they spent, those that actually did spend. right? So those are two different ways of looking at revenues. And I would love if people would just agree to this, because we're going into all these negotiations with developers, and nobody really knows these frameworks. We should agree to one, and that's why I brought this up. And I also wanted to make a little case study here. So look at this game. We have a 3-day first-time buyer conversion. What does that mean? 3 days after they registered, here, 3% had actually put down their credit card 3 days after they registered. And then we did something, magic, by the way, and it brought us to like 8%, right? That was an experiment. So we let it drop again, back to the 3% level, 3 or 4% level here. So what we had done is we've brought more people to actually spend money by giving them a nice package, for example, in the beginning, or by making it easier for them, or by pushing in the game and telling them, hey guys, you got to buy something. And what we saw then was that our average revenue per paying user, so the amount that everybody who actually put down his credit card has paid on average, went down significantly, right? In the beginning, we had like, what is this here? We had like $3.50 that they spent within the first 3 days. That was awesome. Here, it went down to only $2, right? So we had lost more or less half of our average revenue per paying user. So what does that mean? Was that a good deal right now? We had more people spending money, but they were spending much less on average. And so in the end, sometimes you want to look back to the more simplistic metric, the ARPU, and look at this only and say, okay, if we just look at the 1,000 people overall, how much has each one of them spent? And you see that this curve actually trended up significantly. So overall, for all of these 1,000 people that we brought in right here, we would have had $100 in revenue. And here, we would have had $200 in revenue. Okay? So what I wanted to do with this is I wanted to say, if you only look at metrics from one way or the other, it can tell different stories, and you have to pick the right ones. And I think for looking at buyer conversion and at revenue per user, if you have these 3 things lined up for you, and this logic that I've been describing before, that would be awesome, and that will help you get a better understanding of your game. Okay, so I'm already halfway through with that. So what do metrics do? What do they help us with? They help us understand that British gamers don't care about soccers, and we do, you know. They also showed us that our Christmas holidays should be extended a little bit more to have like a similar effect like Ramadan. That would be great. We would support the gaming industry. And also that people who can't get a date are our best audience. It also shows us we should not assume that all countries are the same. And if we say, hey, we've built a game for Germany, probably things will be very different in France, or in Turkey, or in Russia, or wherever you're launching your game. And you should look at your data carefully, because external influences like a Eurocup could probably lead you to spending hours and hours thinking about technical issues where there's actually none, and you should spend your time much better, you know, watching TV and watching soccer. And data will sometimes even give you clear direction on the existence of a technical issue. So when people say, oh, we have a bug here, and we think that people are, you know, experiencing this bug, and that's why the people are not playing it, and I've seen it in the forums, ask them for data. Because in most cases, it'll help you understand whether this problem really exists or not. But unfortunately, it's never only one thing, so these things are overlapping. Sometimes you have a technical issue right at the same time as the Eurocup is coming up. So this is a science in the end, but it's a science that is rewarding, and that sometimes can even be entertaining. And I hope that I could give you a little glimpse of that today. So metrics are not as boring as it sounds, and I think if we concentrate and focus a little bit more on a metrics-driven approach to the gaming business, we could do a better job and strengthen our position as the industry in Europe. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Again, if you have a question, please raise your hands.
No hands?
Hands, hands.
I think nobody understood.
No questions? If you did not understand, raise your hand.
If you did understand, raise your hand.
Well, that's not
it's
all
almost
of you.
30%, man. And for that, I got a good retention rate in the room, I guess.
Yeah, pretty
right?
much, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.